gonna share announcements with you guys as well, so you'll get to hear the magic that happens every month here in Waterloo region. As I mentioned, this is our first ever cross-border international KWSQA meeting. We're meeting this month with the Lansing area software testers. Thank you, Lansing area, for joining us and helping us trial this. As I've mentioned here at the KWSQA in the past, we like to try some experimental things, do different things to change it up, so it's not just your, every month it's just a speaker. So this month we decided to go with this format to try it out, and hopefully it's a success and something we can do in the future. A couple of kind of housekeeping things is what we are going to do is, if you have a question, we'll ask you to come down here to the microphone, speak into the microphone, ask your question, and then we will kind of share responses with both organizations. I think there in Lansing, if you want to figure out how you want to pose your questions to us, that would be fantastic. Or of course you can put them up on the screen as well, and we'll go through those. A couple of KWSQA specific things. I wanted to let everyone know that we did keep the CFP for targeting quality open for an additional week. It closes, is it Friday at midnight?
Yes.
It closes Friday at midnight, so you still have a couple of more days to get in your CFP to be able to speak at targeting quality this year. Again, it's September 23rd and 24th. You have that right?
Yep.
23rd, 24th in Cambridge. We're starting to get really excited about it. May meeting is
the last Friday or last Wednesday of this.
the last Wednesday of this month, and 29th, yes. Our speaker is James Spear. Thank you. So I don't know why I'm doing the announcements. I'm crowdsourcing announcements today. Thank you, everyone. We'll have James Spear speaking, and then that will be our last meeting here at the university until October. In June, as always, we will have a social event, so watch your email for details of that. And then July, August, we'll take some time off to rest and recuperate and plan for the next upcoming year. Of course, September will be the conference, and we'll wash, rinse, and repeat. With that all said, I will hand it back to Josh as he quickly chews his last mouthful of food for the day. Again, thank you everyone for joining us. Do it.
Almost done chewing.
I like that. We'll do it at the meetings.
All right, so I think really quickly we just want to do a quick kind of meet and greet between the two rooms here. So last folks, you're up on our big screen here, which maybe you can kind of see behind my head. And if I can get the KWSQA folks back on the screen there. Say hi, everybody.
Hey. Hi.
Nice. I don't think we're going to do like round the room type of introductions, but I think if you want to come up and have a conversation, then by all means, certainly give us your name and tell us a little bit about yourself. Jeff or James, was there any other logistics you wanted to cover before we got started? I see that we've got some questions listed and we've got some upvoted ones. So maybe we can start from the top. Oh, I was going to send you so we are going to take notes. Kyle's going to be our minute taker, and that's going to be, we're just throwing them in a Google slide deck for now. So that's something you guys can refer back to after if you don't have if you're not taking your own notes. And I think the last folks are also recording this. So hopefully at some point after this, we'll be able to post this up on our YouTube channel as well. So that'll be another reference.
Yep. Yeah, we're recording
it. Cool. Let me just make sure I can get you guys the link for the shared doc. Oh no, you guys are going to see all of our KWSQA secrets. Both of our secrets. These guys have no idea what they're doing.
No, but right. One of them is there is no secret ingredient in the secret ingredient soup.
All right, so I've shared the link with you guys. And
Yep, that's the one.
what the load and find those questions again. Kyle's already pre-populating. Kyle. Shall we just dive in maybe with the first question? Does that sound good? So I should have encouraged people to put their names on these, but I think some of these ones that came to the top were pre-populated. Might be more appropriate as anonymous, but the one that seems to be at the top of the list has anyone had to change their role at their company that is moving away from manual testing, and what was that experience like? And how do you show your value now? That is definitely a juicy question. I think maybe Sabina put that question in here, but a few people upvoted. Is there anyone that voted on that one that would like to kind of share their insights or go first? I'll go first if I have to, but my stories could be kind of racy, so flip a coin, yeah.
You go ahead.
Okay, cool. So I've had to change my role at a company that was moving away from manual testing. I jumped into management, so I kind of escaped, although it was definitely from the frying pan and into the fire. So may not be the best move for everyone, but it's working out well for me. For me, I decided to focus on some of the other passions that I had outside of testing, and that was mainly around developing people and building cohesion around teams and creating like safe places to innovate and to learn and grow. So I essentially just kind of found other parts of my job that I found enjoyable and moved where I could grow in those areas. I've worked with others that I know have chosen to pursue a more technical route. I'm not sure if I'm going to get any of them up here today. Maybe our minute taker might want to talk about something. Great, come on up, Bailey. I'm just trying to figure out this camera situation. So if we go this way, now they'll see you.
Yay, exciting. Okay, so I'm in the company I'm at right now.
Introduce yourself.
Oh, sorry. Hi, I'm Bailey Hanna. Yeah, the company I'm at right now, we just kind of redefined what it was to be a manual tester. So it didn't mean that, we were spending all day, every day, having to check code reviews and just manually testing it. But what we kind of redefined it as is that, being a tester in our organization now is that you're just advocating for quality. And that doesn't mean that you have to be manually testing the software every day. It means you're advocating for what are the risks with new projects, with certain features, with any kind of code change, and just making sure your whole team is involved in the quality process so that manual testing kind of takes a back seat to everything. And that's kind of how things changed. And we show our value by still doing all of those things. We're still discussing quality, we're still advocating for it, but that doesn't necessarily have to be through finding bugs. It can be through helping the teams in any way that's going to improve the quality for our customer.
Cool, thank you.
I can look too.
Yeah, if you'd like to, please do.
We can play the game of guess what I was trying to say.
Please try to actually do this so they can see your face.
Oh yeah, I guess taller.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Kyle. I've been involved in a couple different transformations in the past. One where it was taking testing into more of an automated developer type slant, and the other one is that I'm involved in now is taking it more towards a kind of problem-focused kind of solution type slant. And I think that one of the things that's interesting about the second one, which is the one that I'm more interested in, is looking at why teams are experiencing problems, trying to figure out what the quality issue is or what the process issue is, and then also helping them to have that conversation about what their challenges are. So for example, we release all the time, but we release breaking changes, or we release all the time and we feel really good about it, but we don't have a firm handle on what our software is doing in production. In my mind, those are still very testing and quality based discussions, and testers can get involved there. As far as the technical side, I mean, there's a lot of DevOps, and I see testers being able to, there's a lot of DevOps attention, and I see testers being able to move into that kind of area because they are concerned about the whole application and the larger context and it is very technical, and it is a lot of interesting technologies. And like from the Stack Overflow survey that came out last week, there's a lot of interest in like Docker, and people feel the pain of Puppet and Chef and want to find better solutions for that. I think there's a lot of, I think there are a lot of paths away from manual testing and into more looking at the system, looking at how your business works. Cool.
Did you guys have an anecdote you wanted to share over in Lansing?
Doctor, you want? Go ahead. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, my name is Clinton. I work here at TechNet, and I wouldn't say that we necessarily have quote unquote made a move away from manual testing, but an evolution that I've seen happen on lots of teams is that one of the things that we try to do is that we try to reduce the friction of the cost of the handoff between devs and QA, and one of the things that ends up happening is that the exploratory testing will start to move from the testers to the developers. And at that point, the testers end up being more of like what you could call a quality coach, where you, instead of having actually spending a lot of time hands-on keyboard testing the software as it's coming out, they're actually like walking around from developer to developer, and the developer saying, hey, here's what I'm working on right now. Here's the test that I performed so far. What do you suggest? And then continuing, like, you know, sort of like helping the developers test better, as opposed to being somebody who does all the testing themselves.
Very cool. Thank you. And I'm trying to speak around sandwich again. Just a second.
Okay. And then my name is Jeff. With the manual testing that I was doing years ago before I was working here at TechNet, I started to get more interested in automation based on the amount of time that was available for testing. And as we know, there really isn't that much time allocated with all the testing that needed to be done. So I took it upon myself to start learning more about automation and creating some automated tests, so that at least for myself, I could have something to run a small subset of tests each morning when I came in and checking my email, to help me cut down the amount of time that it would take to do some of the manual testing. So it was out of sheer frustration that I took it upon myself to learn and to try cutting down my time.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, go ahead.
My name is Teresa. I was gonna kind of just say that my approach was kind of a preemptive approach. I'd done manual testing for many years, and then decided to go back to school to get a programming associate's, which work covered. And so I learned tons of programming languages really quickly, but got that exposure so that I had more options of what I could do. Even though the company I was at the time was very large, I went to a company that was smaller, and now I can wear more of those hats. It's not such a separated role. So now I can do manual testing, I can do automation, and also management. And that's been pretty cool. But I think the fact that I went and did some extra things on my own gave me those opportunities, so that if something did change, I was kind of prepared a little bit already, if that makes sense.
Yeah, very cool. One other story I was reminded of, and I think some of the others have mentioned the same kind of theme, was moving the sort of the skilled manual testing role into a more of a consultative role. That's something that we've done at D2L, which has been very interesting. One kind of, not really a snag, but maybe one bump in the road that I found kind of interesting was teams who didn't currently work with a skilled tester wondered about what the role was all about. We called it a test strategist role, and a question I always heard at a lot of meetings was, what does this role do? Like, what is this person here for? And that was a bit of a yellow flag, because obviously if you have a role that people are questioning the value of, you want to make sure that you're instilling what that value might be, or the role might disappear. And so, you know, we had to make sure that we had visibility into like what that person was bringing. And they were essentially helping a development team to think about their test strategy and to bring perspective in that someone who's kind of nose down writing code wouldn't necessarily be thinking of that type of thing. But yeah, that introduced some extra overhead to that transition. Anyone else on this topic? Yeah, come on up. All right, we're back?
Yep.
Yes?
Yep.
Awesome. So I'm Dylan Keel. I work with Bailey over at Road Monk. And I found that to carry on your previous topic about how people weren't sure what the test strategist role was when that was introduced to a team, was that it was, I personally found in myself that you had to kind of chase that to not just be on the team and to be that resource for them, but to be actively involved in pushing yourself, and not only into the work that's assigned to you, but also to the work that your team is doing how do I put this? To not just be a resource for them when they need it, but to advocate to be that resource that will help them do their job more effectively. So, and when I first started off, when I was moved on to the team and kind of testing this rollout, I felt like it was, I had those questions too. I had those people that were just asking me, so it's like, if you're not going to be just testing things, like what else are you doing? And that was a bit of a rough barrier to kind of pass it the first time, especially when there's concepts such as like doing testing sessions instead of going through just like a manual testing list. And at the end of that testing session, you're looking for somebody to help debrief it, to kind of get a second look at it. And when we were a little bit crunched, we were pushing for developers to start doing those testing sessions. They were also asking me, it's like, well, if we can do the testing sessions, it's like, why can't we debrief? Why can't we do that stuff there? And it's, as much as we want to instill that concept of quality in the developers, is like, we are still the point man on that. We're still the resource that's on that team that has that knowledge, that has that experience, that has that mindset to help round out the testing strategy. Yeah, especially if you're asking developers to come in who are normally working as sort of just like I always have trouble doing things public speaking. It's especially when developers are just normally their work is make this thing, and sometimes they're not thinking about the whole picture. So you have to be that resource on that team that kind of pushes that little bit extra for what we advocate for. Right. So yeah, that's about bringing that perspective. Yeah. So just my experiences on that. I'm not sure if I added anything to the conversation, but absolutely. Thank you. Anyone else? Thoughts on this topic? Yeah. I'm blanking on names. I'm sorry, but
Lauren. Hey guys, my name's Lauren. So I made an opposite transition that Josh did. After a while in management, I went back into hands-on testing and automation. Cool thing I can share about the current company I'm at, all the QA scripts and automated tests that we check in get code reviewed by the developers. So for QA folks who are trying to become better coders, that's a great way to learn. So yeah, that's my 2 cents. Thanks.
We're getting some good mileage on this one. Has anyone else got a thought or come on down?
Just to echo some of the comments, I think Teresa over in Lansing said to be preemptive, and also on Josh's comment to, educate about what your role is. One of the things I would add to those 2 comments is ask why. Why is there this shift? Because to me, testing is about finding problems, and if you're eliminating a role that's finding problems, then why do you not want to find those problems? You may not find them anymore if you don't have this role. So let them be, whoever's making these decisions, let them be aware of the risks. Myself, I demonstrate that by finding 20 important bugs before any of our automated scripts find a single one, right? So, I would maybe, in addition to asking these questions and make sure that you're advising the company to go the right way, you can also demonstrate your worth by, showing the value of your current role practically. Cool, thanks. Any others? Anyone else in Lansing? We're hugging the time, but I think we've got a slightly bigger crowd here. So start seeing how poorly I'm going to try to move this frame of it. Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on to the next question, shall we? So the next one, oh, and now it's tied for first. What has been the impact of DevOps culture on your role as a tester? Is it positive? Maybe we'll give Lansing the first chance on this one. Yeah, go for it.
For the purposes of this conversation, or for the purposes of my answer, I'll define DevOps culture as like the idea that you would ship continuously into production, and you would use sort of a trunk-based development type methodology, where if you had a partially completed feature, you would ship that into production, but feature switched off, right? So you, instead of having a big feature branch that you would push all in one big splash, basically trunk-based production in production is what I would call DevOps culture for this, and like having like production monitoring. So if you have a different definition of DevOps, then that my answer might not apply, I guess. But so how it's affected my life as a tester is in my previous testing life here at TechSmith, I used to work on our cloud products, and we have that sort of DevOps-y life where if you're pushing a commit, you're pushing it into production, and it needs to go through a continuous integration pipeline. You get your code review, you get a review from a tester, and then it goes live, and at that point it merges with our code base, right? Once it's already live. So I got used to that, and I actually like that life very much, because one of the things that I think really affects your test strategy as a tester is how safe is it to recover from a bad push, right? Like how a big thing that informs your test strategy is how easy is it going to be to undo that problem if you create a problem in production. And the way that it affected my life as a tester was that more recently I got moved on to one of our desktop products, which has much longer development cycles. Like it could be years between publishes to customers, or historically it has taken that long. And so those of us that got moved on to that product from cloud, we were like, well, part of the reason why this takes so long is because we're not treating the trunk of the code base as something that that's like production. So when we started saying, okay, although we're not shipping this thing to customers every day, we need to treat it as if it's live for customers every day, so that when the business decides they do want to ship it to customers, we don't have to run around with our hair on fire trying to figure out whether or not it's good, right? We say, well, it's good all the time because we're doing the practices that we need to do. We're pretending that it's a production thing all the time, even though it's not necessarily shipping to customers every single day. That makes our lives a lot simpler and easier, kind of like it is in the DevOps world, where it's like, oh, we ship something into the product that broke it. We know what to do in order to fix it right away, and we also know that that was probably the only show-stopping problem that it had at that moment. Yeah, so basically, like, the way that it affected my life as a tester was having those sort of trunk-based development type philosophies simplified my life as a tester on a non-DevOps product.
Great, thanks for that. Yeah, come on up, Kevin. Let me flip this around, sorry.
They can see me?
Yeah.
They don't need to see me. I was right there.
That's true.
They know the guy that left.
Just gotta put this in.
Hi folks, I'm Kevin Malley. Currently I'm working at Manulife. This subject is kind of better? Yes. Okay. This subject sort of hits home with me. It gave me a job, honestly. And how it affected me, well, some days it's good and some days it's horrible.
because my role at Manulife is transformation, transforming the organization from a development and a quality assurance, quality engineering perspective into that DevOps space. So I willingly went into this space. It wasn't that I was told I had to go there. I actually accepted a job at the company doing this because it excites me, because I see the opportunity that it gives many of us. I was actually watching the Slido questions as they were coming through, and I didn't comment on the previous one because I kind of wanted to roll these two together, so I'm glad it kind of came next. For DevOps to be successful, there has to be some portion of automated testing involved in that pipeline. That's what's going to give you the rapid feedback, and it's testing from a code level, so a code quality, as well as a functional testing perspective. So when we talk about teams that are focused very much on manual testing, they will have a very hard time adopting and making DevOps work because there's nothing that's there automated to put into the pipelines. I really liked Lee's comment because there is still a place for manual testing. It's just hard to inject a manual person, a physical person, into a pipeline and get a response back in 5 minutes, 30 seconds, whatever it might be. So for me, and I won't go on this forever, but it really, DevOps has given QA a different seat at the table, and a seat at the table where I've tried to get folks involved very early to talk about how that testing, how that feature is going to be tested in that pipeline and get that testing done right away. It's helped in conversations with TDD as well, test-driven development, because if you talk about test-driven development, you start to create that test at the same time or even before the development effort has occurred, and guess what? Now your pipeline is ready to go when that feature is ready. So I'll let somebody else have the floor from there. Thank you.
Anyone else? Anyone else in Lansing? I think one thought I'll share on this topic, if our president was here, Tina, she has a talk about valuing the ability to change and react quickly over perfect code. And I think a lot of that came out of, a lot of her thinking in that talk came out of operating in DevOps. We're in a ever increasing fast-paced environment, and when you're trying to release constantly, it's important to understand better how your code is operating and how you can ship fixes, more so than trying to spend all of your time making sure that what you're shipping is perfect. That was an interesting, I think that's a shift that has come along with DevOps as well.
I just have one quick comment. This is Jeff Lancaster. I'm test manager here at TechSmith. I would say that one of the things that DevOps culture, I think, has opened up is more opportunities for software testers in a lot of the pipelines. And I also have the build team that reports to me. And as we're working on the pipelines, we're finding more and more opportunities where we need to have people addressing certain aspects of the software quality within the pipeline, and how does that fit into the continuous integration, continuous deployment model. So we're having conversations with our testers and our build team members about, what are we doing for like antivirus scanning and security scanning in our code, and testing those types of things. So all these other quality areas that are outside of just the normal functional testing, I think has opened up a lot of opportunities for the testers to get involved with, hey, how are we testing certain of these other quality categories for the robustness, reliability through the pipeline. So we started to engage more and more of our testers in that space, and I think it's just opened up additional opportunities for testers.
Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else? Okay. What's next? Number 3 votes. How do you keep growing in your career? And if you're the most senior in your career path at your company, if you were the most senior in your career path at your company. So you're top of your game. How do you continue to grow?
Yeah. Come on.
So first I'll preface this with I am not the most senior potentially in my career because I suppose it could be the VP of software quality somewhere. But as part of it, you make career choices. So, I've kind of, at the level I'm at, I'm a QA manager at an organization, and I like doing that, but I wanted more in my career. And I have for several years. So one of the things, a number of things that I've done, first and foremost is contributing to KWSQA. So giving back to your community. I think that's a really important thing in helping your community, helping others. Another is I have an opportunity to work with co-ops a lot. So, kind of constantly working with co-ops and, helping them develop and watching them develop and grow in their careers, I personally find exceptionally satisfying, and it helps me kind of mold the future of testers. The next one I would say would be speaking at conferences, kind of getting out there and not only as a speaker have I had the opportunity to share my ideas, but it also allowed me to kind of meet a whole bunch of different people that I wouldn't necessarily have met, and I probably learned more in the side conversations at conferences than I ever have kind of in a training session or at work. I benefited from that hugely. And then finally, myself. I've had the opportunity to start teaching at the college level, so kind of, and there's lots of opportunities. I think testing and quality is kind of one of those things that's starting to rise up at the post-secondary level, where there's a lot of desire for that. So I think there's a lot of opportunity at the community colleges to provide in that way. So those are some of the items I would say that helps me to continue to grow, kind of in my career. So anybody else, please contribute.
Thanks, Robert. Anyone? I'm going to start singing if people come up. Is there people up here? All right, excellent. Go for it.
Teresa, I know for me personally, I was at the same company for 10 years. And for me, it's jumping out of that and going to a new company, which, that's a very personal thing. Not everybody has to leave a company to get what you're looking for. But, I have been using the same systems, the same programs and stuff. And I went back to school and everything while I was there, but to actually apply it in a real life situation wasn't necessarily going to be the case to take the QA department in this whole new direction to learn this other thing. So going to a different company, I've learned a lot of new tools, a lot of new techniques, and obviously new people, new developers, new QAs. And that has been an additional spark, I think, for me personally. But also being active in the community has been helpful. Being part of this QA group, networking with some of the other tech groups around here has helped me meet people. I've also mentored people. At my last company, I did start a mentoring actual program so that people could actually, try to get better at things that they felt that maybe they were weak at and knew somebody else within the company, was stronger at. So I guess a lot of those things for me personally helps me grow. Sometimes each company may have their own rules of what makes you go to this level, what makes you go to this level. And sometimes that can get a little bit hard to measure. Sometimes you may think you're ready, the company may not think so. But if you continuously learn on your own and bring your value up in your internal self, eventually I think that makes the organization better as well. So that's, I guess, my 2 cents.
Great, thank you, Teresa. Oh, Jeff?
I'll throw in my 2 cents as well. With testing, there's so much opportunity to expand and to continue to grow that I think a lot of people overlook. You could look upstream and try to find ways to learn a little bit more about development without actual coding, so you can help your developers. You could find out ways to pair with customer support so that you can try to figure out the pain points there to help with the test efforts or things to bring back to your team. There's the automation that you can learn. If you're at a web-based company, maybe learn about mobile testing, or maybe learn testing on a different platform or different technology. The conferences is a really good idea, going to those, going to the meetups. Even starting, if your company has a pretty decent software testing team, maybe even just having regular meetups within that team during lunch and just start talking about things like we're doing here to help continue to grow yourself as well as the team. So there's a lot of opportunities outside of just looking at manual testing in front of a computer all the time.
Thank you. Did you have a point too? Thanks, Jeff.
Hey, so Bailey again. I think one of the things too that people kind of forget about at times, and this is actually something that Graham said to me at one point, it shouldn't be about getting to like the next level. It's what skill sets are you trying to level up, and you can always do that without it having to be, even if you're the most senior in your career path at a company, that doesn't mean there's not still things for you to be learning. And something like that Rob said about co-ops, I actually find co-ops really fascinating because I feel like I learn as much from them as they learn from me, because they come into it completely fresh with like no preconceived notions of things. Whereas once you've been in the industry for a while, you're like, okay, we normally do it this way, then we do it this way, and we do that because of whatever. And a co-op will come in and be like, I think that's weird. Why do you guys do it that way? And they come up with these new ideas, and you're like, never would have even thought about that or considered it.
It's too profound.
Hey, sorry, back now. But
It says we're muted.
Yep.
okay, cool. Yeah, so there's like always things that you can learn from people. I mean, even if you're most senior at a company, like it doesn't mean that there's not still ways that you could keep growing from that. And expanding the things that you do. I mean, for me, I go to a lot of conferences, but that's what makes me happy and, how I like learning. But another thing is I just go on Twitter because the testing community is so active on there. And I read some of the things that people are posting, or I read, what people say about other conferences or blog posts and all of that stuff. And there's always still stuff to learn. Even if at your company or in your career path you think you're at the top, there's always still going to be something that's going to change 2 years down the line, and trying to stay ahead of it or on top of it is still going to be very beneficial. Anyway,
Thank you. I'll take a moment to plus one I think the mentorship that many people have mentioned, as well as participating in a community. Mentorship is interesting because I don't think you can fully appreciate what you do and don't know about a subject until you try to teach it to somebody else. So that's pretty telling. And then, yeah, I think community involvement is important because it builds your network. It gets you connected with people that you're not otherwise going to meet. And thinking about how you want a group to grow and learn is also an interesting perspective that you consider more so when you're trying to organize things like this, for example. The other thought I wanted to build on a tiny bit was Bailey's point about like, yeah, you might be top of your game at testing, but there's other skills to learn. And that reminded me of the situational leadership model, which if you haven't read about that, definitely check it out. The whole point of that is really understanding where somebody's at in a specific task to be able to give them good leadership advice that's in tune with how they need it. But at the root of that is, recognizing that skills are a task-based thing. They're not, I'm 20 years in tech, but I'm really terrible at writing code. So like, you know, there's the tenure that you put into a position doesn't mean that you're good at all the things. There are some things that everyone is still a beginner at, and those are things that you can recognize in yourself and try to create. Cool. Any other thoughts on this topic? Okay. There's something else I'm trying to, at the back of my mind, like someone kind of talked about, oh, when I think about skills, there's someone is going up against the notion of soft skills, and I'm trying to remember the term that they use because I really liked it better. There's something like resilient skills, but that wasn't quite it. It sounded cooler than that. But I also liked the notion that like your skill development doesn't just have to be in tech. It can be in coaching or communication or you know, that all that kind of stuff. And those skills carry across pretty much any job that you're ever in. So I also do not like the word soft skills there, but I really wish I could remember what that word is. I'll follow up when it pops in my head. I'm going to move on to the next question, I think.
Referred to as transferable skills.
Transferable, yeah. That's definitely the same genre. How have you solved your test data needs? If automated, how so? Commercial tools or in-house, UI-based or service-based injection? Who's got a thought on that question? Test data. But Jared's got it. Yeah, come on up.
Right here. Lansing. I'm Jared. Jared Small. I do test data management for a living. I really like Jeff's sweatshirt there in Lansing. It's awesome. Just had to say that. Hopefully we don't spend too much time on this question so we can get to the next one about AI before the end of the meeting. So yeah, test data management. It's kind of like, how do you want to look at it as a practice, or do you want to look at it as something that's done decentralized through your teams? And for me, my focus has been on a practice-based centralized test data management approach, but kind of going into a hybrid model where we're giving teams a self-service opportunity for self-service. And some of the tools I've worked with are kind of more on the centralized level. So enterprise level tools for large batch-based processes, ETL-based processes, data masking, and things like that. One of the tools that we've used at several places that I've been at is called CAT Test Data Management, CATDM. But there's a whole bunch of different tools in kind of the big box segment for setting up your test data and for protecting your test data. Informatica, IBM, there's so many vendors that have tools like that. When you break it down into data that's coming through at a faster pace, that's not like ETL or batch, then you start running into some different types of problems. So when you get into streaming data or data being passed through microservices, then these are some of the challenges that I'm working on today. And I don't have answers for all of them yet. I can tell you that I am looking at service virtualization for some of them. And there's also data virtualization tools out there as well that we're also looking at. But yeah, it's a pretty broad question. It kind of depends on what you need. Do you need test data? Do you need protected test data? Do you need production-like test data or a copy of production that's masked? These are all big problems in the test data management community. Thanks.
Any others? Yeah, go for it, Jeff.
So one of the things that that I was testing early on on the website was trying to generate test data, because there were the piece that I was testing was like the middle piece of linking different programs and workflows into the system. So in order for me to actually test stuff, I needed input from the very first system. So what I ended up doing, again, out of frustration and time constraints, is I looked at creating a macro where it would go through and actually generate the first step of the process, generate a bunch of data that I could actually start using for testing my part, which actually was, because it was a macro, it was kind of quasi doing some testing along the way, because if things didn't work, I wouldn't be able to get my data. But the macro was able to go in and quickly generate the data that I needed to be able to do my job. And it was very quick and easy to set up. The other way that I found was getting, working with the DBA team to actually get a copy or mask copy of data into the test database that was able to actually be used for testing and make use of it that way.
Great, thank you.
My name is James, and I work at TechSmith. So for the fake data that you need generated, as it was mentioned earlier, it really does depend on, you know, what you need it for. Like if I need just a quick person to be able to input some data, like an internal system, I might use something like a fake name generator. If I want to use automation, if I'm like using, say, Ruby and Cucumber with which is, you know, basically Selenium and such, I would use a gem called Faker, which has a lot of methods that have just random data, and every time you run your automation through it, it'll generate like a new combination of user data. So.
Yeah, it's a lack of
They're not breathing.
They're holding very still. Or maybe we are.
Did you message him? He's on the way now.
Must be their side. Some slowness at the border crossing.
Right.
Got to go through customs.
Yeah, the permanent on the video.
The video was being held up at the border.
Mm-hmm.
There we go.
There we go. You might be muted.
Yep. Sorry about that. Go ahead, James.
Did you hear any of what I said?
Start over.
You started talking about Cucumber.
Something about Cucumber.
Yeah, if I needed to use fake data for like automation using Ruby and Cucumber, I'll use a gem called Faker, and that just has a lot of different methods, and it just goes through and randomizes all kinds of like personal data, and you can have the input into your system via automation. So that was it.
Cool, thanks. I think it was on the wrong mic too. Can you still hear me now? Can you hear me at all?
You're very quiet right now.
Yeah, I can't hear you.
Now I'm on the actual mic I should be on though. Weird. I think we've been using my laptop mic. Does that sound okay? Yeah.
That's better.
All right, well, that's where we're at. That's the one that was defaulting to every time I reconnected. Okay, any other thoughts on test data? Yeah, come on up. Good thing we carried all this extra equipment.
Yeah.
Hi, it's Dylan again. I know we're anxious to get to the conversation for the next question, but I just wanted to point out that for test data management, it's I've worked on both ends of the spectrum with generating it
locally or generating it through a script or through the API or whatever have you, but I've also had experience in managing like gigantic buckets of legacy test data that you have to maintain throughout the through upgrades and through migrations and stuff like that, and it's an absolute nightmare. But that kind of data is also useful to have as a small subset if you could actually keep it around. And the reason for that is to see how your data, as your infrastructure changes and how your platform changes, how your data moves along with it. Because you have users back from way in the beginning, whenever you set up your platform, whenever you set up your new project or whatever have you, 5 years down the road, that data has gone through all of these migrations and all of these changes. And that data may or may not look exactly the same as the data that you would create today. So sometimes although it's a pain in the butt to maintain, sometimes it's useful to have a little bit of that legacy data to make sure that those customers that you brought on first aren't left behind. So just a thought.
Thanks.
Any other thoughts on that one? So next up, how have folks solved their test automation framework needs when spanning multiple languages? For example, needing to build an automation solution for. Oh, great. Okay. That's what Jared was talking about. Where is it?
Third.
Number 3. Our company is thinking about some AI-powered recommendation features. How do you get started testing this if actual data sets and expected results are unclear? Great question. Anyone doing testing with AI?
I can jump in secondhand.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Come on up.
Hello, Kyle again. So the company that we're at, because we're a smaller company, I get to be involved in some different testing conversations around AI. It really is a different mindset about how the systems work. So whether you're talking about like recommendation systems, or you're talking about data analytics, or you're talking about different kinds of machine learning, it really depends on kind of artificial intelligence or advanced kind of computation that you're, or learning computation that you're thinking about. The best thing you can do is to find someone that understands how that system works, and then to look at where the risk is. So for like really, like, and this is just really briefly because I've only just been involved in conversations and haven't done a lot of work myself. If you can understand like how it's generating recommendations, then you can start to check for cases, either cases that customers care about. So for example, the company that I work for works for giving directions and wayfinding for mostly retail spaces. We want to give someone a good recommendation when they search for something. So where machine learning might come in would be people like me might want to go to Starbucks. Older people might want to go to Tim Hortons. Younger people might want to go to David's Tea or Tea Pan or something. You can start to recommend things based on age. You can start to do things based on what is a more popular search. So understanding how that system works and how you test for it, I think, does require some domain knowledge about how that system is making those recommendations. And I hope that helps. That's just not firsthand, not a lot of experience in it, but from what I've seen so far, you do need to have some understanding about how it's operating.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't actually have a firsthand experience in testing artificial intelligence, but like I can say what I would do, which is sort of what would have been my default in the first place, is like if you're familiar with the concept of like heuristic test strategy, or like you have like basically these mnemonics of like, here's how you would assess any piece of software. I think that model is robust enough to handle artificial intelligence testing. Basically, the idea behind it is rather than having inputs and expected results, which you might have in a more deterministic type thing, I think what you want to do at that point is like use something like a heuristic test strategy model to like design some experiments without necessarily having an expected result in mind, so much as having like, okay, I want to do a science on this thing and find out okay, given that I give it this set of inputs, it spits this out. Is that reasonable? Okay, now I'm going to vary that by a certain amount and see, and like, you know, use your experiments to examine and understand the behavior of the artificial intelligence more like a scientist rather than somebody who's trying to prove that it does what we thought it would do. Is what would to me.
Cool. Anyone else?
Do we want to do one more?
Yeah, we might have time for one more. We got about 5 minutes. Now I'm all worried about the order. Is there? Yeah. Okay. So it looks like we have time to touch on the automation frameworks then. Wherever that one went. Automation framework needs when spanning multiple languages. Anyone have domain experience there or wants to share a story?
Spanning multiple languages? Oh.
Yeah, like the example I think was trying to automate in Java and JavaScript.
I mean, I can tell you what we have been doing on our side, but I think that generally, like, the language that when you're talking about unit testing or even integration testing, the language of the system under test is important. But if you're doing something that's more of like an outside-in type deal, like end-to-end testing or UI testing or API testing, it doesn't necessarily matter what the system under test was written in, because like if you can exercise that API or the UI and then you can assess the result of what you did using some sort of automation, then it doesn't, the language that the system under test is written in doesn't matter. So for example, on Camtasia, which is the product that I work on, that's written in C++ and C#, but we're actually using a combination of C# and Lua to automate it, because we use Lua to like write out and parse logs that are happening after you exercise the thing in C#. So the code that's getting exercised under the hood is all C++, but the end-to-end tests don't use C++ to test it.
What I wonder about is there any, one thing we do with the time we have left is, are there any cool tools that people are using that they wanted, but other people know about?
That's a good question. So Kyle's just bringing up in the couple minutes we have left, is there any cool tools anyone is using that they wanted to just plug or give a quick heads up about? And if you want to just shout them out, I'll repeat them, I guess.
Win10 snipping tool.
Win10 snipping tool?
Boo.
Oh, yes.
But I should be using Camtasia.
Ruby with Cucumber.
Ruby and Cucumber, yeah.
I know my company has used Cucumber because we had some developers that came from a previous company that were using Cucumber with their Java systems. And so we're more of a JavaScript company. And so they took a lot of the Cucumber skills and we use it for the JavaScript now and are writing in JavaScript. So it's kind of similar in the structure, but obviously different in the writing.
Great.
Supertest, integration testing for Express and Node.
So Supertest, which is an integration testing tool for
Express and Node. Yeah.
Express and Node.
Yeah.
I'll come up to the mic so
Sure.
that Josh doesn't have to repeat it. I'm not specifically using it myself, but a few people on my team have started using Test Cafe rather than a Selenium-based UI automation tool, and they've had a lot of success with that, and they're pretty happy with how it's working.
Another thing would be like Ruby with like any type of REST API gems.
Cool.
Fails as well.
For Win10 testing, we're now using a thing called WinApp driver, which is a Selenium-esque UI driver for Windows.
Swagger?
Swagger, yes.
Swagger for APIs. All right, I think we're gonna wrap up. So folks in Lansing, thank you so much for helping with this experiment today and joining us and sharing your insights about tough testing challenges. And thanks everyone here at KWSQA for coming and sharing your anecdotes as well. Maybe a quick round of applause for all the participants today. Thank you.